In today's episode, I want to talk to you about the princess and the queen. These are two archetypes that were wildly helpful in my own life and still are, as they are for so many of my clients. I think it's fair to say that many of us grew up watching the fairy tales of being rescued from the tower or from the wicked stepmother. We were rescued by the prince, where we went on to then live happily ever after. All of our problems were solved. Everything worked out beautifully. We then went on to our teens, our 20s, and beyond, and continued consuming content through movies and dramas that again perpetuated a similar storyline. Seeking for help, seeking for the love, seeking for signs of being worthy and being chosen. As a side note, it's important to understand that over 70% of movies are written, directed, and produced by men. So I'm not sure about you, but when I was in my 30s, for context, I'm now 51. When I was in my early 30s, I remember thinking, gosh, so many of these female characters just don't seem very deeply nuanced to me. Or the movie would end and the storyline would leave me wanting more and feeling like there was not the kind of conclusion or closure I would have imagined for. And so it was soon after that, I went to my computer, like I do many things when I am on a search for knowledge. I started to look at the statistics. How many movies are written, produced, and directed by men versus women? And I found very, very few are directed and written by women. It's in the 20 some percent range, depending on if you're looking at written, directed, or produced. So when we are consuming for entertainment, often it is from one perspective. And it's often from a perspective that is completely opposite what our lived experiences and desires are as women. So I do think this is an important thing to understand, that if you find yourself watching television series or movies and wanting more depth, richness, articulation, nuance in the character development, there's nothing wrong with that. You are craving a depth and a breadth that oftentimes is not captured when it is through male directing. This is not obviously in every scenario, but in many, we are not getting the vantage point of the woman. So we will circle back to this in other podcasts as it relates to other things I will be sharing and talking about in here. But it is important to note. Okay, so let's move into, how does the princess and the queen affect your life now? Let's set up the context for the princess energy. Now, the princess is not meant to be insulting. The princess is not meant to make anybody feel bad. I was a princess and in my princess energy for quite some time. And there are times now where I can feel myself wanting to fade back into a princess reaction. And I'm going to give you plenty of examples of what this looks like. So first, let's set the context. Who is the princess? She's so well-meaning. She's so well-intended. But the way she goes about having connection with others, the way she goes about having her needs met in relationships, the way she goes about getting what it is that she needs in her place of work, in the way that she even looks at herself in the mirror, is from a somewhat stunted, not super functional, maybe a bit fragmented level of functioning. Not because she's a bad person, just because she's limited in her tools, in her skill sets, and she's not extremely resourced. And the not extremely resourced will be an important thing to hold into your back pocket. We'll come back to this in a bit, of how do we become more resourced. So a princess, we can almost think of her as a young girl. She's running around in one of the dress up dresses that's a little bit scratchy and has the fake lace on it and the plastic shoes that, are slipping off, or she's about to come around the corner and break her ankle in. So if you visually imagine the princess, she's a little unsteady. She's a little scratchy. She's a little uncomfortable. She's a little fidgety, trying to find her way in this other skin, this exterior, of course. So we can contextually visualize the princess in that way. Now, emotionally, she is looking for validation. Do I look pretty? Mommy, do I look pretty? Daddy, do I look pretty? Does my hair look okay? Did I sound good when I sang my song in my microphone? Do you see my report card? Are you proud of me? Do you still love me? And so she is always seeking to make sure she's okay. And that is typical behavior for a young girl, for a little girl who's trying to figure out life. Now, where it can get tricky is if the guidance coming from the parents or coming from the people she has in proximity to her that she is turning to, if the guidance system is faulty, or if the guidance system doesn't have their own sense of grounding, we see how it can get very disrupted in the development for the princess. And this is often where a princess will stay stuck if she doesn't have grounding in the adults around her that ask her, yes, that's amazing. How do you feel about what you did? Reflecting back and teaching the princess how, most importantly, to pay attention to how did you feel? How do you like the outfit? How does it feel on your body? Teaching her to turn inward and check with herself in what feels right, rather than checking outward and looking for confirmation. And very often this happens with the most well-intended of parents. They don't come into the world wanting to raise a daughter to constantly seek and seek, but that is what happens because of ill-informed parenting. And so now we have this young girl moving into her teen years and into adulthood, and she's now coded or primed to seek her validation, her worth, her success, her beauty, her sensuality, her pleasure, intimacy. She's seeking emotional and physical intimacy outside of herself. She becomes this woman in the world who's now in a grown woman's body, but still acting from that princess energy, looking outside of herself for all of the resources, because she was unfortunately not given the tools for self-resourcing. So here she is now, a grown woman in the world, and she has learned, rather than being love inside for herself, she has been fed so many storylines of how if she looks a certain way, acts a certain way, is pleasing, is smart, is in service, is thin, is not too opinionated. If she is those things, then she will be able to attract someone. So she's playing that role. And meanwhile, she's also consciously or unconsciously seeking for someone to notice those things about her. I'm doing all the things. Am I going to get my seal of approval? Am I going to be chosen? Will someone pick me? Does anyone love me? Do I even matter? I wonder if I'm even worthy enough in this body. So we see where all of the self-doubt and self-criticism starts to come in when she's operating in princess energy, waiting to be validated, waiting to be chosen, waiting to be loved. And so in the work that I do, especially in my Muses community, where we talk so much around the princess to queen energy and so many of the things that come up in our lives. And I reflect back and question, is this princess energy or queen energy? And if in fact this is princess energy, how can we reframe it to come back at this situation in your life through queen's energy? And then I will typically give examples of what that gets to look like. So for women who have crossed over the bridge from the princess to the queen is operating in an energy that feels very different. And here's the one differentiator. The princess seeks, and the queen is being. So while the princess is running around seeking all of the things, the queen is very grounded, being the things, because she's come to understand and she has raised herself, taught herself that she is self-contained. Every single thing that she desires, she already has within her. Even if she was not raised to believe that, even if she's not accessed it yet, I want you to understand that every single thing you seek lives within you. So as the queen, rather than seeking love, she's being love to herself. She's filled with self-love. Rather than seeking validation and approval, she self-validates, she self-approves. Rather than seeking compliments, she compliments herself. And rather than seeking intimacy, whether it be emotional or physical, she is sourcing intimacy within herself. I teach an entire series in my Muses community about self-intimacy, and I will get into that in the future. But for right now, I want you to hear that the queen sources everything she needs from within. When we are in the energy of the queen, what happens is we then set a standard for the bare minimum of what is required when we're already giving it to ourselves. What I see happen so often is when women don't have self-love, self-worth, they don't self-approve, or they don't self-pleasure. What then happens is the first option that comes along that does any of those things for them, they glom on for dear life and they call it good enough. And you get stuck in relationships that are like one little dry breadcrumb rather than an entire banquet because you believe that's all you're worthy of because you have not experienced those feelings before, because you've never given them to yourself before. You grew up on the belief and the ideology that it needed to come from outside of you. So the first time it came from outside and someone gave any attention to you, that was it. You were sold. You called it love. I see a lot of women get stuck in this trap of trying to make a magical relationship out of the tiniest little speck of dirt. No evidence that it's anything more than that. But because they have not built that foundation within, they fell so easily for the very first ounce of attention that came their way and tried to make it more than it ever even was and justify all of the behaviors. It even happens in places of work. We get the tiniest little bit of a paycheck or money or a title, and we find that someone is giving us success and is validating us by a certain compensation. But it's because you've not already set the standards of what success gets to look like and feel like and how much you actually are worthy of and the level of compensation you so deserve. So you can see how when, as the princess walking around in the world with a very low set of standards for yourself, because you don't know yet how to do those things for yourself, so you seek outside, and then you never switch the seeking outside of yourself to learning how to integrate and be within yourself. And so now we have grown women walking around in the world acting like baby princesses. So let me give you some examples of this. First, let me also say that it is so much easier to attract all the things that you desire in relationship. And there's going to be a whole nother episode about this. But it's so much easier to attract the things that you so desire from a relationship once you already embody those qualities yourself, because you are then an energetic match for the thing that you want to call in. It's not something that is foreign to you, so it will find its way to you more easily because it's the language, the energy, and the frequency that you already move with in this world. If we are talking about the queen, and we are talking about what her energy looks like, if we were to go to an event and someone was in their princess energy, often those are the women who are giving a list of all of the things that they need you to approve of them for. They are saying all of the things that they want to be recognized for. Or they are coming in and they are not even comfortable in their own skin or their own outfit. And so they are fidgeting and they are not standing in an energy that feels grounded. She is typically more frenetic, and it's because she's nervous. She's an anxious energy. She's wanting to be approved of. She's wanting to feel loved and belonging. So she's still in her seeking energy. But when the queen walks into the room, you can feel her energy. You can feel her groundedness and her simultaneous magnetism. She attracts because she's not seeking, she's being. She does not have this wall of I am better than anyone. She has a safety about her. She comes into the room and she knows that she's worthy, just as she knows every other person in that room is worthy. She doesn't have to prove all the things she's done or all the successes she had because she knows who she is. She doesn't have to be fidgeting around in her outfit because she feels a sense of comfort with the outfit she has selected and the way it adorns her. She's not in her frenetic energy. She feels as grounded as an oak tree, standing firm and yet incredibly approachable. When we think of princess to queen in the place of work, the princess is just thankful that someone even gave her a job, even if she's had the same pay rate for the past 3 or 4 years, because she just looks at it a place of, from an energy of, at least someone picked me. At least someone's paying something. And the queen is a woman who says, I know my worth and what I bring to this place of business. and I am here asking for my annual raise. I am here asking to be compensated in the ways that make sense for how I show up here. The queen is also fully prepared that if she doesn't get what she's asked for, she will renegotiate the terms of her contract, or she will begin looking for something that is a better match for her, a place that values her worth and what she brings to the table. Because queens do not stay in places that are not reciprocal for them. Queens understand the value of I give and receive. You give and you receive. It is back and forth, an exchange of energy in relationships, in places of business. And princesses are often just grateful that anyone even looked at them or even gave them that measly paycheck, because they have not built the sense of their worthiness yet. A queen is a woman who, when there is an issue in her relationship, she says to her partner or to her mother or to her sibling or to whoever she needs to speak with, who she's in relationship with, I need to talk to you. I care so much about this relationship. And because of that, I want to build a bridge. And I feel like right now, we are not able to really get to one another. We seem so far apart. Let's sit down and have a conversation. The princess often is in her magical thinking. She thinks about the problem. She often makes herself a victim of the situation. She thinks about what she wants the other person to do. And she has the magical thinking, hoping that they will telepathically know what it is she needs and then start doing the thing. Because the princess doesn't have the sense of self-confidence or self-worth to speak what it is that she so desires or needs from that relationship. She's terrified of broaching the subject that there is conflict or something that doesn't feel right to her, because she's afraid of being abandoned. The queen knows that abandoning herself by not speaking would be the worst abandonment of all. These are the differentiators in princess to queen. Another place where the princess shows up is in intimacy. Let's say sexual intimacy. The princess is turning off the lights and pulling the covers up and just laying there waiting for her partner to do something. Often because she doesn't feel comfortable in her own body. She's not come to this place of honoring of her body. Or in the princess energy, she still sees herself as an object. So sometimes in the princess energy, she is in just performance energy, not soulful energy. So it can show up in one of two ways: the layback with the covers up, or the extra performance to make sure that the person's really happy, but no real soul connection to the intimacy that is happening. The queen, on the other hand, feels connected to her body, does not apologize for the age, the years, the cellulite, the stretch marks, the anything. Because as the queen in her body, she knows that she houses such divinity, as does every other person. And so she's not in hiding energy. She's also not in performing energy. She is in communing energy. The soulfulness of two people communing and sharing a moment, an energy, a frequency in intimacy is how the queen shows up when it comes to sex. When we think about self-pleasure, the princess is the girl who, whether raised in a certain indoctrination with her religion or culture or background, is terrified of most of her own body, and especially of any intimacy or self-touch, because she is still under the belief that it is wrong, that it is bad, that it is dirty, or that it is for someone else. She fell for the storyline that her body was for someone else to touch and not herself. The biggest sham of all time. And we wonder why there's so much shame laden around sex and sexuality and self-pleasure for women, which will be its own episode coming soon. But the queen knows that every single part of her body is welcome and open for her touch, for her pleasure, for her love, for her compassion, for her orgasm. Because the queen understands that she cannot possibly teach someone else how to bring pleasure when she's never even felt pleasure from her own self, created by her own body, her own hands, her own movements. So when we zoom out and we look at the princess to the queen, we can imagine visually the princess is in that scratchy dress that she's outgrown, and the sleeves used to be down to her wrists, and now the sleeves are up here. She's outgrown it, but she still keeps wearing it, thinking maybe it's going to be her salvation. And the back half of her foot is hanging off the plastic shoe, and they're really hard to walk in. But it's all she's ever known, so she sticks to that storyline. And then the queen has rewritten an entirely new narrative. And she's done the work that it has taken to build that level of self-love and self-validation and self-intimacy and self-approval. And she stands there so royally in her beautiful velvet gown, adorned in jewels. And she knows that she, just like every other woman, is worthy of that kind of self-love, that kind of feeling, that kind of beauty, that kind of reverence. So what I ask you to do as you journey through the next week, the next month, pay attention in your life to where you are acting like a baby princess. And ask yourself, okay, what's going on underneath this? My partner said this thing to me. I retaliated and snapped back and screamed. What's going on underneath? Okay, what's probably going on underneath is I feel like he never listens to me. I feel unseen. I feel unheard. I feel scared that they're going to leave me. Okay, so we've identified why you reacted that way. Probably it's also a learned behavior. Now the opportunity lives in that moment. After you calm down, you've taken some deep breaths, you can ask yourself, if I return back to that scenario, how could I have responded like a queen? These are the moments that we get to start to self-reflect, kind of hover above ourselves and look at the situation and ask ourselves, if I want a different outcome in my life, it's going to be up to me to create that through different behaviors. So it's going to require us to bring what is unconscious. Often we are living on automatic pilot in baby princess mode. And so what this work asks of you is to bring what is unconscious into consciousness through that self-observation, so that you can then create a completely different response, a completely different narrative, a completely different identity of how you get to experience yourself first and foremost, and then yourself in relationships, yourself in your place of work, yourself in your community, with your parents, with your children, with your own body. You know, a princess goes to the mirror and critiques and wishes for something different or feels unworthy. But the queen goes to the mirror and reveres everything that is just as it is. The queen goes to the mirror and she adorns what is in front of her rather than tries to mask or hide what is in front of her. There's a big difference in those energies. The energy of the queen calms your nervous system, makes you feel always at home within your heart and your soul and your mind, every aspect of your body. So I encourage you, as you move through the coming days and weeks and months of your life, to look at where you're finding yourself in princess. And for many of us, it's a lot. I was operating almost solely in princess energy until about 15 years ago, when I decided to completely change my life and take the ownership into my own hands and stop being a victim of my life. I decided once and for all that rather than pointing the finger at my childhood or at my partner or at anything else that was going on in my community or the world at large, that I would finally take a look at the way I was showing up in every single one of those places and change what I was capable of changing. I hope that this was helpful for you today. I would love to hear from you. If you want to join, come and join in the Muses community where I am doing this work on the daily with women from all over the world. If you have questions about this, that is where you can come and be a part of this beautiful sisterhood community where I will be able to guide you in very specific ways around this particular topic and many, many more for your life.